Good afternoon, Eastern Washington. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from the capital of free Washington, soon to be Liberty State. Brought to you once again by the Committee to Elect Matt Shea, Republican, and the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news. And once again, this is not about right or left. It's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ, and about not ending in prayer, but moving to action. And as Ephesians 2:5-6 says, God made us alive together with Christ and raised us up with him and seated us with him in heavenly places in Christ Jesus. I want to talk today about cleaning up our own backyard in the church. And this might be uncomfortable for some people. I don't know. But I had a opportunity to speak with a good pastor friend of mine today about this exact issue. And what was interesting to me that we weren't focused on, the traditional enemies of the church, those that would seek to persecute the church, ridicule the church, mock the church. What we focused on today was actually inside the church. People that would consider themselves leaders of churches, pastors of churches, and who are gossiping about other pastors and about other people that are Christians and not confronting those issues head on. And it was an interesting thing because he was relating a story to me where in one particular instance, you had a pastor gossiping about another pastor, but then it was very, very weird because that pastor had never gone to the other one, ever, and asked him if the things were true. Researched it out for himself. Never happened. And so what we run into then is a situation where you have pastors, leaders of churches, Christians, who are doing exactly what Scripture says not to do. And what that does is divides the church so that we can't work together. It divides the church so that we cannot go forward with a unified front to fight the true enemies of the church, those that are persecuting and mocking and trying to turn the culture into something we can't recognize. And so I guess what I would ask today is that maybe you're hearing this and maybe the Holy Spirit's convicting you right now. Go to the person. Find out if the things are true. Go through Matthew 18 with them. Just find out. And don't be so easily led astray by just listening to other people. Question those things and put a stop to it immediately. And if we clean up our own house, it's going to be great to see what happens as we change the world in this state. And that brings us now to the international front from the Middle East. Coming from Debka File, a constant flow of Iranian missiles is replenishing arms destroyed by Israel. This is according again to Debka File. The Al-Quds Brigade from Iran fired 20 missiles at IDF positions in the Golan Heights. Israel responded by hitting at least 50 Iranian targets in Syria. And then, and you're not going to probably hear this anywhere else, the U.S. Department of the Treasury issued a press release today. This is the quote from the headline at the top. United States and United Arab Emirates disrupt large-scale currency exchange network, transferring millions of dollars to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force. Now, we saw these guys actually in Iraq back in this 2004, 2005 timeframe. So they've been trying to exert their influence in these areas of the world, and particularly in that area of the world for a very long time. But when you start seeing this kind of what I would call asymmetric warfare, where now it's becoming about currency exchanges and trying to cut Iran off, Now we're kind of getting to some true motivations about what's actually happening in the Middle East, I think. So again, you probably haven't heard that from the mainstream media, but you can go on the U.S. Department of Treasury's website, just click on press releases, and boom, it's right there. All right, also on the international front, and really, this is kind of anytime somebody tries to denigrate the negotiating of the release of hostages, I kind of cringe at that. Say what you may about Trump. 3 Americans were released from North Korea and touched down. Trump met them personally when they touched down at Andrews Air Force Base. So that's what leaders actually do. And apparently he has also now set the date in Singapore for his meeting with the head of North Korea. And so that is going to continue. And a lot of people, and rightfully so, very cautious that this is not a ruse by the North Koreans. And I would be cautious too. I mean, they've been doing a lot of these so-called negotiations in the past, and it hasn't really amounted to much. But on the positive note, 3 hostages home in America. Also on the international front, Venezuela. Starvation and suicides up in this oil-rich nation due to the socialist policies there. And hyperinflation over 8,000% since last year. And all those people that said it couldn't happen. The New American having a great article proving them all wrong. On the national front, Barna out with his latest poll on morality. And very interesting that poll showing that Christians are losing touch with moral foundations. Why is morality important? Because a lack of morality has dramatic and direct effects, not just on a society, but on an economy, on politics. It's unbelievable. And there really is a war for the heart and soul of America happening right now. In Iowa, a bill that would ban abortion after the detection of a heartbeat, getting, of course, taken to court. Are we really still fighting about this? I mean, years from now, people are going to wonder how it was ever possible that such a barbarous practice as abortion was allowed in America. Also on the national front, 400 schools have walkouts pro-gun. Did you hear that in the media? No, of course not. Why? Because the media is used to lie. The media is used to create the perception of public support where there probably isn't any. How do I know that? Well, take the Socialist Review here locally, for example. They printed an opinion piece by James Gordon Perkins. Now, Perkins has been part of this Upper Columbia human rights. The whole thing was tied to the Southern Poverty Law Center, okay? But James Gordon Perkins writes in this article that I endorsed Jared Bonnow, which is not true. I haven't even met with him. But they had to write that because they have a specific narrative that they're trying to play out. And so, will we see if the Socialist Review retracts a blatant, outright, unfounded print in their editorial? Nah, probably not. And if they do, it'll be on page, A18 or whatever. But this is what the media does. And it's interesting that people are still arguing that that's not the case. But it is indeed true. And we need to understand that that's how they operate. Also on the national front, defensive gun use. 3.5 times guns are used, 3.5 times more to defend life and property than they're used to commit crimes. That statistic alone should shut up the gun control advocates, but of course it does not. Why? Because their true agenda is indeed to disarm America. And why do they want to disarm America? Because when you are disarmed, you can no longer fight back in any meaningful sense. And our founding fathers understood that. The right to bear arms was the final check and balance in our system. And they know that. So does every communist dictator. So does every national socialist dictator. So does every fascist dictator that has existed. This is history all over again. And for all of you out there that have not read, it's a 26-page book written by Sir John Glubb. 26 pages, that's it. And it's called The Fate of Empires by Sir John Glubb, G-L-U-B-B, John Glubb, okay? Read that. You can read it in a night. And you're gonna read it. It was written in the 70s. You're gonna read it and you're gonna be like, that is exactly what's happening today. And it is. History is following a pattern. It rhymes. Also on the national front, the NSA tripling. I want to say that again. Tripling collection of innocent Americans' phone records. You have people still trying to argue about this too. But this is in direct violation of the Fourth Amendment. This coming to us from the Sydney Morning Herald. 534 million records of phone calls and text messages of Americans last year. And then you have people out there, I don't have anything to hide. That's not what this is about. It's about the integrity of the system. It's about the integrity of the system. And the fact that we have a Fourth Amendment in place for emergencies, for the exact time when somebody says, you know, we really need to relook these things because we have an exigent circumstance. It's in the interest of national security. That was written for exactly the moment when people would say that. 534 million records. Total violation of the Fourth Amendment. The right to be free from searches and seizures. The right to be secure in your effects. And that includes electronic. The Founding Fathers threw that in there as a catch-all, just to make sure nobody could try to violate this. We have to make a decision. Do we want to live in a society like that? Do we really want to live in an Orwellian society? And it's not unreasonable to ask this based on what is happening right now. All right, also on the national front, very interesting. This coming from Fox 25 News, Oklahoma City. There is an article out, and there are still questions. And I'm going to ask my guest today about this, too, because he's done a lot of research on this. A lot of questions still hover over the Oklahoma City bombing, but one in particular, a bombing survivor was denied access to unknown DNA profile from an unidentified victim. Okay, so this person survived the bombing. It's been 20 years, over 20 years. And the DNA profile for and I want you to remember this, P71. Okay? It's not been linked to any known victim. It's an unknown DNA profile at the bombing site. The court denied her request to know and have access to that DNA profile. And this came from a leg, again, that did not match any of the known victims there. Again, raising questions. Why are these things not answered even 20 years on? All right. Also, on the regional front, I talked to you all about RCW 43.37 weather modification. We sent in a public records request. We have received back over 30 gigabytes worth of information based on my last count and downloading. We're still downloading. It's that big. And still going through it. But it includes some interesting things, including redacted files and redacted memos in regards to the lawsuit on the waters of the United States. And there's other things in there. So we're going to take kind of a comprehensive review of all this information, because it's not just apparently about weather modification, but also about things that have been modified by the weather. It's a very kind of interesting way that they interpreted that. So we have a lot of information in here, and some of it was candidly unexpected. So I'll keep you updated on that and where this ends up going. Also on the regional front, Seattle's saying, hey, we got a better idea on taxing. We got a new idea on taxing. We should tax based on the number of employees a business have. What? Yes. If you have 10 employees, you're going to be taxed based on those 10 employees. You know, I mean, you can only violate economic laws so long. But even Amazon, with a left-leaning head, even Amazon is now stopping construction because of these ridiculous ideas coming out of downtown Seattle. And just one more reason for the 51st state. One more reason for Liberty State. Also on the regional front, industrial hemp rules up by the Department of Agriculture here in Washington State. You can still comment on those until May 25th. So please get involved on that. Also on the regional front, California. There's a bill introduced by a state senator down there that does indeed ban Bibles. It uses the Consumer Protection Act to say that publications that are attempting to essentially change people's minds on homosexuality and the practice of homosexuality, that an action could be filed against you under that Consumer Protection Act, essentially banning Bibles in California. Now, Liberty Counsel and several others have written about this, and some people try to poo-poo it, say it's overblown. Snopes did a myth-buster thing on it. It's just not true. The legal language is very clear. This creates a cause of action that would effectively ban Bibles in California. End of story. It's the real deal. You can read it yourself. Also on the local front, Red Pill Expo coming June 21st through 23rd. Going to be a lot of people at Red Pill Expo. Again, you can use the discount code SHEA, S-H-E-A, when you're buying tickets and save 15%. I'm really excited about the number of speakers. There's a ton of speakers coming, and it's going to be right here in downtown Spokane. Also on the local front, this weekend, the Douglas County Lincoln Day coming up May 12th at the Wenatchee Convention Center. Yours truly is going to be giving the keynote address there and talking about Liberty State. So if you're in the Wenatchee area, you probably want to come. It's going to be a great night, and you get to see the presentation. There's going to be a lot of folks there. And already the left in downtown Seattle is having a conniption fit because Matt Shea is speaking there. The Stranger completely losing it. And it's funny, they make fun of us all the time. A bunch of ignorant hicks. You guys must be trying to set up some sort of a Christian racist hate cult, despite the fact that we have people from all ethnicities that support this overwhelmingly. But we don't listen to facts, apparently, in downtown Seattle, or they don't. And this is all they got, and they keep making fun of us. Hey, look, if we're such a burden on you, if we're such a problem to you, if we've created you so much heartburn and heartache, let us go. We're sorry. Let us go. Piece of cake. Unless you have another agenda, wouldn't you be forgiving? Just let us go. You'd have more money for your socialist programs and socialist action in downtown Seattle. You wouldn't have these ignorant hicks who have a higher intelligent literacy rate than you do, but I digress. You wouldn't have these ignorant hicks saying you can't do that and trying to stop your agenda. You'd be free to do whatever you wanted to. Wouldn't you support that? Or do you have another agenda? It's an honest question. And I'm hearing crickets out of downtown Seattle on that, too. Makes you kind of wonder. All right. That's the briefing. Remember, the antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. Thank you to everybody that's been praying for us. Thank you to everybody that showed up on Tuesday night. We had a great event up at Trezzy Farm. A lot of great speakers. Got to honor some folks with some awards. Pastor Ken Peters, Covenant Church, Patriot Pastor of the Year. Patriot of the Year, Glenn Morgan. We had the Legislator of the Year, Representative Dave Taylor, for his work on the Hearst decision. We had the Laurel Durkee Legacy Award going to Rick and Roxanne Layton, longtime activists here in the Spokane community, and really some of the nicest people you will ever meet in your life, ever. Just wonderful, terrific folks. And they really have done the job of spreading the news and message about Patriot Radio around to everybody. It's why I think our Patriot Radio US Facebook page has really caught fire. But also remember, this is a listener-supported show. You can go to voce.com, keep us on the air. But thank you to everybody that showed up there Tuesday to help us stay on the air and help the message of freedom and liberty continue to ring throughout the hills and valleys and mountains of eastern Washington, northeast Oregon, and northern Idaho. Well, that brings me to my guest today, Bill Jasper, senior editor of the New American Magazine, also Patriot Journalist of the Year, one of America's top investigative journalists, and also the author of Global Tyranny Step by Step and the United Nations Exposed. Bill, thanks for joining me on Patriot Radio today.
My pleasure, my honor. Thank you, as always.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the research that you have been doing recently on the deep state. Is it real? And I mean, most of our listeners think it's real, but I mean, is it real? Is it as networked and organized as it would appear? And also, you know, there's some of these things that are out there that a lot of people are wondering about, like QAnon. You know, what are your comments on that? So go ahead.
Well, yes. I mean, Matt, we are living through right now, daily, in real life, real time, what is very blatantly clear to me as the deep state. And when I use that term, a lot of people have different definitions for it. But as we said in the New American, our special issue on the deep state, which was mostly the work of my colleague Alex Newman. He went through all the different facets of the deep state. And what we're talking about really is the co-opting of our government, and not only our government, but institutions that have networked with our government at very high levels, to where they have, over the past few decades, actually nearly a century, we have seen private globalist organizations take control of most of the executive branch of government, so that we have changes from Democrat to Republican, Republican to Democrat in the White House, and the deep state, the bureaucracy, keeps going. We now have this huge Orwellian bureaucratic socialist state operating on all these different levels, this labyrinth and network that controls so much of our economy and so much of our military and our intelligence communities, particularly the intelligence community. And this is what we see, especially in the past year, where the top members, top leaders of the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, and the DIA, and other intelligence agencies that have been co-opted by the networked globalists. And principally, we point to, as we have for decades, the brain trust that seems to be at least the front for the globalist internationalists is the Council on Foreign Relations. We see them controlling, having their people, their members, And they're totally committed, the Council on Foreign Relations, to destroying national sovereignty. They have been able to put their people into all of the top levels of government. And so we see now along comes Donald Trump. And I, in my first article on him, I said, well, I don't particularly like the man because he, as a Christian and as a conservative, he didn't really strike me as being a very good example of a concern. I mean, he's supported Democrats most of his life. He's a New York businessman. Throws his money around on very glitzy things, hobnobs with the Hollywood folks. But the big question was, is he really hooked in with all of these people in the deep state who have been running our country? And it seemed like he had a lot of connections to them. But the more we dug in on him, it appeared that, well, no, he's really kind of a maverick, and he really... His opposition to them, which he announced during his campaign, he said he was not a globalist, that he was a nationalist, that he believed in the Constitution and our national government. It appears that that wasn't just a show. We've seen that so many times in the past, where Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, George H.W. Bush, all proclaimed that they were going to fight against the globalists, the internationalists, and they didn't. They turned out to be agents for them. It looks like Donald Trump truly is the real guy. Now, if anyone who follows the New American regularly knows that we are not just a total cheering section for Donald Trump, as we same with regard to any politician. We believe in judging without fear or favor based on the Constitution. That's what every elected official takes an oath to, as you know, as an elected official. So we are not exactly pleased with many of his things with regard to some of his adventurism in the Middle East, his budget sign-offs, much of his big spending. However, it's very clear that the powers that be in the deep state, the very powerful globalist forces that have been running our country for the last several decades, really have been doing everything possible to destroy him and to knock him out of office. They are really worried. If you read the regular blogs, the Internationalist, the Foreign Affairs, the writings of the Aspen Institute, the Brookings Institution, the Council on Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, they are really going bonkers, attacking him, and they are doing it now through, and have been doing it for the past year, through all of their controlled media sources at CNN, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of these big media, left-wing, liberal, left news sources that have been sending us down the path toward bigger and more government, destruction of our Christian heritage, the culture war, etc. They're all lined up against him, and that's been evident for the past now going on 2 years, ever since the campaign. And they are funding. Many of these same sources are also funding all these left-wing groups that are out in the streets attacking him. So they're attacking him in the streets, they're attacking him in the media, and they're attacking him through the political process. Both the Democrats who are against him and the never-Trumpers who are rhinos in the Republican Party. They're all internationalists. They're all trying to thwart his every move that would undo much of the agenda that has been taking us to rack and ruin for the last several decades. So we've been following this on many different paths, but one of the ones that's most obvious is the way in which James Comey, former director of the FBI, who's still out on his book tour now, he's being feted in all the big places of the great and the good, being placed on, given softball or powder puff treatment in interviews on CNN and NBC and the New York Times, the Washington Post. All of even Bret Baier on Fox gave him a very soft interview, could have gone after him on a lot of different things, could have exposed him, but didn't. So James Comey represents the destruction of the FBI. Many conservatives think that the FBI is this storied, legendary anti-communist organization that helped us through the Cold War, and a lot of that is true. But since J. Edgar Hoover passed on, we've had a series of political appointees that have taken the FBI, just as we've seen with the CIA and the NSA. They have been moved from being the sword and shield protecting America to really pointing daggers at us. And this, one of the stories that you brought up about the 300% increase in the NSA spying on American citizens, 500 million phone calls and text messages just since 2016. That's one indication of it. They are being turned. The intelligence agencies have been moved from being the sword and shield protecting us to those which are pointing daggers at us. And to say that is not to be in any way disloyal or un-American, as CNN, of all places, would have us believe now, and much of the rest of the media. It is to say, hey, we put the Constitution first, and the Founding Fathers believed in a limited government. They would not have countenanced any kind of trespass like this. That's why they put the Fourth Amendment in there. And Americans need to memorize that. The Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. And so those are protections that we have to demand be upheld by our government, and not to be swayed into accepting violations of our privacy and of our rights every day, to where we get to the point where, like, well, you've mentioned it a number of times. People say, I don't have anything to hide. I'm not worried. The point is, you better be. Anytime government is getting into areas where it's not supposed to be getting into, and where it's violating those protections guaranteed in the Constitution, we shrug our shoulders at that at our own peril. And so what we see now is all of these agencies. We've never, ever in our history, seen anything like this, where John Brennan, the former head of the CIA, and James Comey and Phil Mudd, the former CIA FBI agent who is on CNN now, threatening the President of the United States. I mean, and they attack him and disparage him all the time, but to actually be threatening him, saying, hey, as Phil Mudd did on CNN, he says, hey, he can't get away with this, talking about President Trump. They're going to kill him. And he was saying that approvingly, meaning the intelligence community, is going to kill Trump. That, to me, was a very unveiled threat to the President of the United States. And for CNN to not fire him immediately, not to bounce him out of there, and to disavow, that's just incredible. He's still on there spouting all this.
You know, I think that it is too surreal for a lot of folks. But when you have a congressional report, you have Noonas coming out and saying, here it is, laying out the facts. And essentially, they were abusing the entire intelligence process for political purposes. That ultimately is what the implication of this is. And then you have this side issue of them collecting all this information on innocent Americans, arguably without any kind of a warrant in the tradition of general warrants that we actually fought a Revolutionary War over. And people think that they're not going to do the same thing to them. They're doing it to the President of the United States already. Do you think they're not going to do the same thing to you and to me? Can you comment on the Noonas stuff?
Yes. Okay, so it's been almost 3 weeks ago now. The House Select Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, just usually referred to as the House Intelligence Committee, finally released its report. People say, well, didn't that come out several months ago? No, what we got several months ago, back in March, was the House Intelligence Memo, which was dealing with just one small part, a very important part, of what this intelligence report that was released on April 27th was all about and is all about. And that the memo that came out in March, as listeners may recall, dealt with the FISA, F-I-S-A, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court warrants that the FBI had gotten to surveil Team Trump, presidential candidate at that time, Donald Trump, and his campaign team, for the FBI and NSA to surveil, monitor their telephone conversations. That, remember, President Trump later came out and said, look, the Obama administration has been wiretapping me, and all the media said, oh, that's a crazy Donald Trump, crazy conspiracy theories and whatnot. Well, you know, none of them have admitted now, really, he was right when he said that. He was being surveilled, and that was allowed to happen when the FBI, using hopefully this won't get too involved, but using that phony report known as the Steele dossier, that was the one, the salacious, unverified one that this British agent had done under the pay of Hillary Clinton and her campaign and the Democratic National Committee. They paid him to pay Russian informants, many of whom undoubtedly were Russian KGB and FSB agents, to provide him with information that they could then use to discredit Donald Trump. And they came up with these salacious stories about him romping in a hotel room with prostitutes in Moscow, none of which has any shred of evidence at all. All of the things that appeared in that. But they used that memo that was paid for by the Clinton campaign to get these warrants. So it was improper and most likely illegal what they did to get the warrants. And if anyone should be investigated now by a special counsel or by any other authorities, such as the House Intelligence Committee or whatnot, and referred for prosecution, it should be the Clinton campaign and the DNC. They're the only ones that, we have proof that they paid for this. They were working with members of the Russian government to get this. There's no evidence. The Noonas Report, which came out finally on April 27th, and it was delayed so long because the intelligence community, as it's called, meaning the intelligence agencies, the FBI, and the DOJ, the Department of Justice. And people say, well, wait a second, the Department of Justice works for the president. How can they be obstructing it? Well, that's part of what we're dealing with here, as we said in our article on the deep state bureaucracy. We have thousands of members of the bureaucracy in the Department of Justice, Department of State, Treasury, Defense, all of the bureaucracy, thousands of them who still are in there, who were in there during the Obama administration, some of them going back to the Bush administration. And they are almost completely opposed to Trump and his agenda. That doesn't mean all of them, but many of the ones that are political appointees, as well as many of those who are civil servant. We know this because from many things. But for instance, the FBI agents, Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, in their emails, they talked about their secret society in the Department of Justice. Over in the Consumer Finance Bureau, we have another secret society that was called the something from what was that? The Dumbledore Army. That they took that from the those Harry Potter movies. That's what they call themselves, the Dumbledore Army, and they are committed to fighting against Trump from within. So here's people who think they have a right to thwart the will of the American people. We voted in Donald Trump. He is the president. He has a right to appoint who he wants to appoint. He has a right to fire any of those people who are within his ambit of firing, and to not have to face impeachment or inquisition over that. But they have said, no, we're going to implement our own agenda, irrespective of the president, and that is what we see being coordinated at all levels. And so, yes, there is a deep state. It is a conspiracy. The collusion that they keep talking about with President Trump and Russia, really, the only real evidence that we have of collusion is that which is working against Trump. All of these people within the bowels of the federal bureaucracy, and those people who have left the federal bureaucracy, like Comey and Brennan and Hayden and all the rest of those from the top-level agencies of the intelligence community, they have all moved over into the media and into think tanks and into other positions of power, and are actively working now to undermine our republic in a way we've never seen any time in my lifetime. I've been watching this very closely for nearly 50 years through many different administrations. We've never seen anything like this before. And so this is very serious. And so regardless of whether one is a Democrat or a Republican, whether one is a liberal or a conservative, whether one supported Donald Trump or not, it should be very evident that folks, we're under attack here. We are under attack. It's not just Donald Trump who's under attack. It is our very system of government and our liberty that's under attack.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that when you look at how things have played out and how accurate. People have knocked Donald Trump's tweets, but his tweets have been pretty darn accurate and months ahead of time. And then when the truth finally comes out, yeah, Trump was indeed right. And I wonder, based on your contacts and the people that you know, will any of these people be held accountable? Hillary Clinton et al., will any of them be held accountable, even though there's pretty clear evidence laws were violated, particularly with the leaking of classified material in this attempt to get Trump?
Well, we have, to answer that, I would say we have the best chance now that we ever have had in my lifetime, but it is a chance that is coming up to a very close decision point at some time in the very near future. Because if you look at what has been happening, Robert Mueller and James Comey and John Brennan and all the rest of this gang who are out there in the media all the time now and who are pushing this, they are trying, it's a race here. They are trying to push this Mueller investigation through so that they can at least have the color of some kind of indictment against President Trump and play it up enough in their controlled media that they will be able to push it past the American people, make them think that, yes, President Trump has done something heinous and horrendous and he must be impeached or he must be removed. But at the same time, President Trump, from the information I have, has many different indictments underway. And the chess game right now is what's going to happen in the Department of Justice. I know he would like to, meaning President Trump, would like to have fired Assistant Attorney General Rod Rosenstein long ago. I think he misjudged Rosenstein when he asked him to stay on. And I think he misjudged Jeff Sessions. I think Sessions really blindsided him when he recused himself and allowed Rosenstein to take over and to appoint Robert Mueller. And then Rosenstein has been running that ever since, and Sessions has been kind of on the sidelines, allowing Mueller to just run rampant. And many legal scholars have pointed to this. Said, look, Mueller, former FBI, former Justice Department, Mueller has been dirty for a long time on a number of things. He put forward as this guy with a sterling reputation, just like James Comey. But he has thrown in his lot with the deep state, and he is going after President Trump. And Rosenstein basically gave him free sway. You know, the special counsel is a problematic arrangement anyway, not really anticipated in our constitutional system. It's really questionable that we should even have it, or should have had it at any time in our history. But even under the Justice Department's rules, the special counsel is not just supposed to have a free fishing expedition, or as President Trump says, a witch hunt. He's not supposed to be a prosecutor in search of a crime. In other words, he's not just supposed to be able to range free over everything, and that's what we saw when Judge Ellis last week said, wait a minute, on the Paul Manafort case. He's in fact, the judge said, come on, man. when he was talking to the prosecutor, he said, "Come on, this is ridiculous." He says, "You don't have any grounds for bringing this case. This was something that happened long ago. This is a chance for you to get the president on something that isn't even related to the Russia investigation." And Rosenstein, whether he is ideologically committed to this, or whether the deep state guys have something on him, and they're squeezing him one way or another, or they're bribing him in some way. It is really amazing that he has been so committed on this and has been so defiant of the House Intelligence Committee and of other members of Congress, of the Senate. We mentioned the Noonas House Intelligence Report when it finally came out. Huge chunks of it were redacted. They're just blanked out, in fact, whole pages. And so after delaying months and months, giving documents to the House Intelligence Committee, Noonas and other members of Congress had to threaten Rosenstein with contempt of Congress and actual impeachment, saying, look, we're not just going to hold you in contempt, we're going to impeach you. And Rosenstein said, wait, he says, I can't be budged that way. He's just being very defiant. And then he trickled out a few more documents. So he was stonewalling all this time. So then the House Committee finally gets the documents, or at least some of the documents that they wanted. They put together their report, and then they had to resubmit it to the Justice Department, to the FBI, and to the other intelligence agencies for them to review and redact anything that might harm national security. And so this is exactly what many of us expected was going to happen. They just redacted a whole bunch of stuff, anything that might reveal anything embarrassing or anything that might politically or criminally implicate them. The intelligence agencies who have been holding this up all the time. And so that's why this has been delayed so long, and why, for instance, Joe DeGeneva, former prosecutor who you might see on television quite a bit, he's been very, very critical of all of this. He said, look, Rosenstein and the Democrats, Adam Schmidt, et cetera, have kept the president hostage for 16 months with this, not letting the American people know that there really is no evidence against Trump. Every day we have the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, NBC, et cetera, blathering on about Russia collusion. Yeah, like we're supposed to believe these folks who helped the communists in Russia and China and Cuba and everywhere else for decades, now all of a sudden are supposedly very concerned about national security. They have been working with the deep state to thwart President Trump and the American people for well over a year now, and it's time that we say enough, and for members of Congress to start using the full powers that they have to hold in contempt and to impeach and to withhold funds and to force the Justice Department, Jeff Sessions particularly, either to put up or get out. He shouldn't. If Sessions is not going to do his job, I know President Trump would love to have fired him by now. He probably is just weighing, okay, I got all these other irons in the fire, and unless I have a real strong support from the American people, I got to choose who I can fire and who I can get rid of at any given time. That's where we come in. We have to give the members of Congress the boot that they need or the fire that they need underneath them to get them to move.
This is Matt Shea on Patriot Radio with senior editor of the New American Magazine, Bill Jasper. Bill, one of the adjuncts in the last 4 minutes that we have left, one of the adjuncts to the deep state is the Southern Poverty Law Center. And they are now coming after Christians and Christian charities with a vengeance. I mean, they have been in the past attacking, but they're really coming after Christian charities with a vengeance and using Amazon in part to do it. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about that, and also how the deep state can use, again, some of this information that they have access to against average, normal Americans and not just the president?
Yes. Well, concerning the Southern Poverty Law Center, I did a story about that today. That's on the New American, about their attack on the Alliance Defending Freedom, the ADF. It's a Christian legal group that has won numerous lawsuits against the left and against legislation and efforts by various government bodies working at the behest of the militant homosexuals, of the ACLU, or of left-wing groups attacking that have been attacking Christians, families, pro-lifers, etc. And so the Alliance Defending Freedom has stood up in court and won cases. In fact, in the last 7 years, they point out, the Alliance Defending Freedom has won 7 key battles in the Supreme Court. That's one major case a year that they've won in the Supreme Court. So that's very big. But then at the state level, local level, and at the federal level, they've won hundreds of cases and forced, in hundreds of other instances, forced the offending groups and agencies to back down. So it's understandable that the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is very badly misnamed, would be going after them. And so they go after every group, as we've been pointing out for years. So they call everyone that they don't like, particularly Christians, pro-lifers, pro-family people, they call them hate groups, extremists, terrorists even. And so they have gone, unfortunately, many of the big major media organizations and social media groups have relied upon the Southern Poverty Law Center to tell them to be their gatekeepers. So the Southern Poverty Law Center has attacked the ADF at Amazon. Amazon has its Amazon Smile program so that if you buy something on Amazon, you can designate a nonprofit charitable group to receive a portion of the price of your product that you buy. So the ADF was on that until SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center, convinced Amazon that this is a terrible extremist group, so they were bumped off of it. The same thing has happened to many other groups. So the ADF and the Christian community are responding to that and saying, look, Amazon, why are you taking direction from Southern Poverty Law Center? They are an extremist group themselves. They defame and smear all of those with whom they disagree. they are supporters of. For instance, they support William Ayers, the weather underground terrorist. So.
Yeah.
So this is where we are today, and it's time for Americans, and particularly those who are Christians and who believe in all of our rights, whether it's your right to speech, your right to defend yourself, your gun rights, your property rights. It's time that we step up and start defending those on every level.
Every level. I totally agree. 15 seconds. Where can people go to read your articles and subscribe to The New American?
Well, I direct them to thenewamerican.com. We have new articles up there every day. We have our print magazine, which is published bi-weekly, and they can get all that information at thenewamerican.com.
Bill Jasper, senior editor of The New American Magazine, thanks so much for joining me on Patriot Radio. Just keep up the great work. Love everything you're doing, and keeping all of us informed about what's really happening behind the scenes. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. And again, The New American, you can just go online, and it is by far the most accurate publication I have ever read, accurate years sometimes in advance of what, shakes down, but always looking to get behind the scenes at the truth using primary source documents. If you have never read it, go there now, put it in your favorites, and you're just going to be amazed. And they're the ones that really have cataloged what's happening in Venezuela, especially with the hyperinflation, too. Done a great job showing how money dies, especially as a result of socialist policies. Well, this is Matt Shea. Thank you once again for joining me on Patriot Radio today. May God bless all of you, and take the opportunity tonight as a family to pray together. And may you make this generation the greatest one.